My own son once looked me in the eye and said, "Mom, from now on, your paycheck goes to me." That moment broke something inside me, but it also woke something stronger. And how all this happened, let's start from the beginning. I was standing in my small kitchen that Thursday afternoon, the aroma of coffee still in the air, when my son Marcus said those words. "Mom, starting with your next paycheck, we're transferring all your money to my account." He spoke so casually, like he was talking about the weather, calm, confident, and certain I would agree. Before continuing, please subscribe and tell me where you're watching this story from, because what I'm about to tell you is still unbelievable. For a moment, I just stared at him. I searched his face for some hint of humor or explanation, something to tell me this was a joke. But there was none. He smiled like a man in control, as if he were doing me a favor. I took a slow breath and said softly, "All right, Marcus, if you think it's for the best." His smile widened, the kind of smile that hides arrogance. He kissed my forehead, cold, mechanical, and said, "It's for your own good, Mom. You won't have to worry about a thing anymore." Those words echoed in my mind long after he left. For your own good. That night, as always, Marcus returned with his wife, Sabrina. It was Friday, our usual dinner night. For 3 years, they'd arrived around 7, expecting food hot and ready. But this time, when they opened the door, they screamed. The living room was empty. The furniture, gone. The television, gone. The walls echoed. Marcus rushed in, pale and furious. "Mom, what did you do? Where's everything?" "I sold a few things," I said calmly. "If you're handling my money now, I figured I'd keep some cash on hand first." His face turned red. I had never seen my son so angry. He looked at me as if I'd betrayed him. "You're crazy, Mom. How are we supposed to watch TV when we come over? How are we supposed to be comfortable here?" That one sentence told me everything. How are we going to be comfortable here? Not you, not Mom, him, his wife. Their comfort, not mine. Sabrina crossed her arms. "You're being selfish, Eleanor," she said coldly. "We come here every week to keep you company, and this is how you treat us? Selfish." The word cut through me like glass. I had worked double shifts for decades. I had lived in second-hand clothes, eaten leftovers for days, and given up everything for my son's future. And now I was selfish. Marcus stared at me like I was a burden. Then he said something that broke my heart. "Maybe it was a mistake trying to help you, Mom. Maybe you're not capable of handling your own money anymore." A silence followed, heavy, cold. And in that silence, something inside me shifted. Not in sadness, but in clarity. I stood up, looked him straight in the eyes, and said, "Dinner isn't ready. If you're hungry, go somewhere else." He glared at me, speechless. His wife muttered something about respect, and they stormed out, slamming the door behind them. When the car engine faded away, I sat down in my empty kitchen. I looked around at the bare walls, the floor where the furniture used to be. But instead of sadness, I felt peace, because I hadn't sold the furniture for money. I had sold it for truth, to see who my son really was. And now I knew. That night I made a decision. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't beg. I would watch. Wait. Let him think he'd won. And then show him who his mother truly was. Don't miss the next part, when I reveal how my own son's lies went deeper than I ever imagined, and how I uncovered the first clue that changed everything. That night, I sat in my chair for hours, motionless, lost in thought. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of realization. I had spent 34 years loving a boy who saw me not as a mother, but as a resource. Marcus had revealed himself that evening, not with violence, not with words, but with entitlement. As I stared at the empty spaces where my furniture once stood, I thought about every sacrifice that brought us here. When Marcus's father left us, I had nothing but a toddler and a part-time job at a law office. I remember crying in the bathroom at work, terrified about rent, wondering how I would feed my son that week. But every tear dried with determination. I took a night job cleaning buildings, slept barely 4 hours a day, and worked until my hands cracked. I still see the image of my little boy asleep on the couch when I came home at 2 a.m. I'd kiss his forehead, whispering, "Someday, you'll understand why I do this." Years later, when Marcus wanted the same expensive sneakers all the other boys wore, I gave up groceries for 2 weeks to buy them. I wanted him to feel proud, to never feel less than anyone else. When he turned 18 and said he wanted to attend a private college that cost $10,000 a year, I didn't hesitate. I signed a bank loan that took me 10 years to repay. I ate rice and beans for months. I skipped vacations. I sold my jewelry, but I was happy because I believed I was building something solid, a bond between us that money could never break. When he graduated, I cried tears of pride. He had become everything I dreamed of. Successful, polished, confident. He even told me, "Mom, now you can rest." But that promise turned hollow. Instead of helping me, Marcus stayed in my home for 5 more years, working, earning, and saving, while I still paid all the bills. He left only when he had enough cash to buy his own $300,000 house, outright. I told myself that was fine. I told myself a mother's job was to give without expecting anything back. But deep down, I hoped that maybe he'd remember me. Maybe he'd care for me when I grew tired. When he got married to Sabrina, that hope faded fast. From the beginning, she treated me like an inconvenience. Polite in public, but cold in every glance. At their wedding, I was placed at a back table, far from the head where important guests sat. Marcus said, "It's nothing personal, Mom. You know how these things are." I smiled for photos, but inside something cracked after the wedding. They started visiting on Fridays, always around dinner, always expecting food. I mistook it for love. I cooked his favorite dishes, baked desserts, even set the table like a restaurant. But slowly I realized they didn't come to see me. They came to eat. They arrived, ate in silence, talked about their vacations, their jobs, their investments, and left. Never once did Marcus bring anything. Not a dessert, not a gift, not a thank you. One Friday after they left, I calculated what the meal had cost me. $15. That was a full day's wage at the office. And I realized then, my own son was using me. That night, as I cleared the table, I whispered to myself, "You've become their free restaurant." It was painful to admit, but it was true. Have you ever given so much love to someone that they started treating your kindness like their right? From that moment, I started noticing more. When my car broke down, Marcus said, "Just buy a new one." When my fridge stopped working, he shrugged and said, "That's life." No help, no care, only cold practicality. And yet, I kept serving Friday dinners. Until that one Thursday when he said he'd control my money. That was the day the old Eleanor died, the one who kept silent, the one who believed love was enough. I knew something darker was coming. I could feel it in my bones. And I was right, because soon I would discover that Marcus hadn't just tried to take my money. He had already been taking it for months. Don't miss the next part, when I reveal how one small bank visit uncovered a secret that shattered everything I believed about my son. The next morning I woke up with a heaviness in my chest that words can't describe. I kept thinking about Marcus's face. The calm confidence of a man who believed his mother was weak enough to be controlled. But I wasn't weak. I was wounded, yes, but wounds have a way of making you sharper. That Friday, Marcus came again just as he always did. He smiled as if nothing had happened, his arm wrapped around Sabrina. They sat at my table, eating the meal I'd prepared out of habit. Chicken and rice, his favorite from childhood. The same meal I used to cook when he came home sad from school. He laughed between bites, scrolling through his phone, talking about promotions and business trips, as if my life didn't exist. I watched him quietly, studying him like a stranger. For the first time, I noticed how comfortable he looked in my home. As if it was his, as if I were the guest. When he was done eating, Marcus pulled out a neat stack of papers from his leather bag and said, "Mom, these are just a few forms for the bank. It'll make things easier if I handle your bills directly. You just need to sign here, here, and here." His tone was smooth, professional, like a salesman rehearsed in manipulation. I looked at the papers. I wasn't naive. I might have been old, but I could still read. The fine print said, "Power of attorney," granting him full access to my finances, decisions, and accounts. He would own my life on paper. "Marcus," I said, keeping my voice steady, "this gives you control of everything. My money, my account, even my savings." He nodded without hesitation. "Of course, Mom, that's the point. You shouldn't worry about these things anymore." Those words, "you shouldn't worry," sounded like a lullaby for fools. Do you think I should have confronted him right then? Or waited to see what he was really planning? Tell me in the comments what you would have done. I smiled faintly, pretending to consider it. "Let me think about it," I said. "I'll read everything carefully first." For a second, irritation flashed in his eyes, but then he hid it behind another fake smile. "Sure, take your time. I know it's a lot for you to process." Then they left, leaving those papers on my kitchen table, like a trap waiting for me to fall into. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at those documents under the yellow light. Something deep inside me whispered, "Check your bank account." The next morning, I went to the bank before work. I asked the teller, a kind young woman named Carla, to print my last 6 months of transactions. She handed me several pages and I began reading, line by line, slowly, carefully. Then I saw it. A $200 withdrawal I didn't remember making. My stomach turned. I asked Carla to check where it was made. She looked at her computer and said softly, "This was done at our Westfield branch, ma'am." My hands went cold. I had never been to that branch, and my debit card. It had never left my wallet, except once. 3 months earlier, Marcus had come to visit while I was in the shower. I remembered calling out for him to come in, my purse sitting right there in the living room. My card was inside. I felt sick. My own son, my flesh and blood, had used my card and stolen from me. But I didn't tell the bank. Not yet, because now I needed to know just how deep this betrayal went. That weekend, I pulled out every file, every old statement I had kept in a box in my closet. I went through them one by one, my hands trembling, my heart pounding harder with each discovery. And what I found was worse than I imagined. A credit card in my name I had never applied for, with a balance of $3,000. Charges from home furnishing stores, electronics, and renovations. That's when it hit me. 2 years ago, when Marcus bought his house and remodeled it. He had used my credit. My breathing turned shallow. I sat on the floor, surrounded by evidence of my son's deception. Every purchase, every forged signature, every lie. He hadn't just stolen money. He had stolen my trust, my identity, my dignity. What would you do if your own child betrayed you like this? Would you expose them or forgive them? As the sun set, I gathered every document, every receipt, and placed them in a folder. I wasn't going to confront him yet, not until I had everything I needed. Let him think I was weak. Let him think I'd still sign those papers. Because soon, I was going to show Marcus the kind of strength he had underestimated all his life. Don't miss the next part, when I tell you how I built my quiet revenge, and how one old friend helped me prepare to take my son down, piece by piece. The days after that discovery were some of the hardest of my life. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't even turn on the TV without feeling a wave of betrayal crashing over me. I kept seeing Marcus's face in my mind, the way he smiled, so sure that I was helpless. But I wasn't helpless anymore. I was awake, For the first time in years, I started moving with quiet purpose. Every morning before work, I would stop by a different place. The bank, the post office, the credit company. Gathering bits of truth like a detective collecting evidence. Each document, each statement, revealed more of his lies. Then one morning, I found something that made my knees weak. While checking an old insurance file, I noticed my medical coverage had been maxed out the previous year. Not because of my own treatments, but from consultations I never attended. I called the insurance company, and the clerk told me the appointments had been made at a clinic near Marcus's neighborhood. My heart froze. My son had used my insurance for someone else. I hung up and sat in silence for nearly an hour. Betrayal has a sound. It's the ringing silence that follows when your world stops making sense. But even then, I didn't confront him. Not yet. I knew Marcus too well. If I accused him, he'd deny everything and twist the story, make me look like an old, confused woman. So instead, I made a plan. That evening, I found the courage to visit a lawyer. His name was Daniel Chen, a calm man in his 50s with kind eyes that reminded me of a teacher who had seen too much of the world. His office was small but neat, the kind of place that smelled like paper and patience. I told him everything. The forged card, the withdrawals, the insurance fraud. He didn't interrupt once. He just listened and took notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and said gently, "Mrs. Harris, what you're describing isn't a family disagreement. It's financial abuse. Your son has committed multiple felonies." The word felonies echoed through my head. My son, a criminal? I felt tears burn my eyes. I don't want to destroy his life. I whispered. I just want my own back, Daniel nodded. Then start by protecting yourself. Don't sign anything he gives you. Close your accounts. Change your PINs. And if he comes again, don't face him alone. He handed me a list of steps to take. Banks to call, forms to file, agencies to notify. I walked out of that office shaking, but with something new inside me. Strength. The next morning, I followed every instruction. I closed my old account and opened a new one under a different bank. I canceled every credit card. I froze my credit line and placed fraud alerts on my name. It took hours, but when it was done, I felt lighter. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was taking back control. That night, Marcus called. His voice was calm, but underneath I could hear tension. "Mom, we need to talk. Come over for dinner tomorrow. We have to fix this." Before, I would have gone without question, but this time I simply said, "I can't tomorrow. I'm busy." He paused. "Busy? With what?" "With things that matter to me," I said quietly. There was silence, long, thick silence. Then he said, "You're acting strange, Mom. Maybe you need rest. Maybe you're getting confused. If someone close to you tried to make you doubt your own mind, what would you do? Ignore it or fight back?" I felt anger rise inside me, but I kept my voice calm. "I'm not confused, Marcus. I've spoken to a lawyer. I know what you've been doing." The silence on the phone turned icy. Then came his whisper. "You talked to a lawyer?" "Yes," I said. "And he explained everything. Every single thing you've done." He tried to laugh, but it came out broken. "Mom, you can't be serious. I'm your son." "Yes," I said, "you are. And that's what makes this hurt the most." I hung up before he could say another word. My hands were trembling, but for the first time in years, it wasn't from fear. It was from power. That night, I slept peacefully, because now Marcus knew that I wasn't blind anymore. And soon, the son who thought he controlled everything would realize what it meant to lose it all. Don't miss the next part, when I reveal what happened after my son tried to confront me face to face, and how that meeting changed everything forever. The next morning, I woke up to a knock on my door. It wasn't gentle. It was sharp, angry, impatient. When I looked through the peephole, I saw Marcus standing there, his jaw clenched, his eyes dark with rage. Sabrina stood slightly behind him, her arms crossed, her expression colder than winter itself. I took a deep breath and opened the door. "Morning," I said quietly. Marcus didn't bother with greetings. He stepped inside as if the house still belonged to him. "Mom?" he said, his voice low and tight. "What's this about a lawyer? What are you trying to do?" I closed the door calmly. "Protect myself," I replied. His eyes widened. "Protect yourself from me?" He laughed bitterly. "I'm your son. You think I'd ever hurt you?" I looked at him steadily. "You already have," Sabrina scoffed. "This is ridiculous. You're letting strangers fill your head with nonsense. Marcus has been taking care of you, and this is how you repay him?" I smiled faintly. "Taking care of me? You mean stealing from me?" Marcus's nostrils flared. "You're losing it, Mom. I never stole anything. If you're confused, it's because you're getting older." Those words, "you're getting older," hit me harder than any slap. He wasn't just denying what he did. He was trying to make me question my sanity. But I was done being manipulated. "I have proof," I said firmly. "Bank statements, credit card records, insurance reports, all with your fingerprints on them." His face went pale. "You went through my stuff?" "No," I said, stepping closer, my voice steady. "I went through mine." Sabrina grabbed his arm. "Marcus, let's go. This isn't worth it." But he shook her off. "No, she's not going to ruin everything I've built." He turned to me. "You think anyone will believe you? You don't even understand how these things work. I was managing your money for your benefit." "For my benefit?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You used my credit to buy your house, Marcus. You forged my signature. You took my savings to remodel your kitchen. Tell me what part of that benefited me." His face twisted in anger. "You wouldn't understand. You've never had real success, Mom. I was just helping yourself." I cut him off. The room went silent. For a moment, all I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat. Sabrina finally spoke, her tone sharp. "You can't prove any of this. If you go public, you'll embarrass yourself. Everyone will think you've lost your mind." I walked over to the coffee table, opened a folder, and laid the documents out in front of them. Bank statements, receipts, photos of his forged signature. "I already have proof," I said. "And the police have copies, too." That was a lie, but a useful one. Marcus's confidence faltered. His voice cracked slightly when he said, "You wouldn't do that to me." I looked at him, my son, my only child, and felt something deep inside me break. "You did this to yourself." What would you do if someone you loved looked you in the eyes and denied the pain they caused you? Would you forgive them or walk away? Marcus's lips tightened. He looked around the room, then turned toward the door. "You'll regret this," he said coldly. Sabrina followed him out, but not before giving me a glare that felt like poison. When the door slammed shut, I sank into my chair, shaking. I should have felt relief, but instead I felt grief, not for what I'd lost, but for who he had become. That night I called Daniel, my lawyer, and told him everything that happened. He listened quietly, then said, "You need to prepare yourself. He might retaliate." "Retaliate how?" I asked. "By trying to make you look unstable, or by manipulating your property. If he thinks you're challenging him, he'll try to regain control, one way or another." The next few days were tense. I barely slept. Every car that passed by made my heart race. Then one morning I received a letter from the county court. Marcus had filed for guardianship, claiming I was mentally unfit to manage my affairs. My knees buckled. He wasn't just stealing my money anymore. He was trying to steal my freedom. Tell me honestly, if your own child took you to court to declare you incompetent, what would you do next? I sat there holding the papers, my hands trembling. For years I had protected Marcus from everything, but now I realized I'd created a man who believed power meant control. And that's when I decided. He might have money, lawyers, and arrogance, But he didn't have something I did. The truth. And I was going to use it to destroy the illusion he'd built. Don't miss the next part. When I reveal what happened in court, and how I turned his own plan against him in a way he never saw coming. The county court smelled like old paper and nervous energy. I'd never been to a hearing in my life. The closest I'd come to law was signing forms and paying bills. But now the hallway hummed with people who lived in a different world. I held my folder tight, the stack of documents inside feeling heavier than its weight. Each page was a small spear of truth I planned to throw into Marcus's carefully built bubble. Daniel walked beside me like a calm ship in a storm. "We'll start by objecting to the guardianship petition," he said. "Then we'll introduce the bank statements, the credit card records, and Mrs. Bertha as your character witness." I nodded. There were no theatrics on my face, only a quiet, steady resolve. The courtroom filled slowly. Marcus arrived with his own team, a young, slick lawyer who wore confidence like a fashion accessory. He made a show of looking concerned and paternal, of course. Sabrina sat just behind him, eyes narrowed, face unreadable. When the judge called the hearing, the room settled into a focused hush. Marcus's lawyer led off with a rehearsed speech about concern for an elderly mother, about protecting her best interests. It was a performance, smooth and sympathetic. I felt the old ache of wanting to reach out and tell the judge how loving and caring I'd always been. But I kept my hands folded. My case wouldn't be won by pleading. It would be won with proof. Daniel moved with careful precision. He introduced the bank statements first, the withdrawals, the unauthorized credit card, the utility accounts opened at addresses that weren't mine. He explained the pattern, how purchases matched timelines when Marcus had access to my wallet, how transactions corresponded to renovations on Marcus's property, how clinic consultations had been billed to my insurance, but occurred across town. Then he called Mrs. Bertha to the stand. Bertha shuffled up slowly, but when she spoke, her voice was steady and true. She told the judge about Fridays at my apartment, about how Marcus and Sabrina arrived and treated me like an unpaid cook, about the dinners I prepared and the visits that felt more transactional than familial. She described in plain terms how she had known me for decades and could attest to my lucidity, my awareness, and my everyday competence. The judge listened, occasionally taking notes. Marcus's lawyer tried to poke holes. "Isn't it normal for adult children to help with finances?" But Daniel had already anticipated that. He presented photocopies of the credit application forms, the forged signature samples, and the withdrawal receipts with bank branch locations that placed Marcus near the transactions. When Marcus took the stand, the shift was palpable. He attempted the same performance he'd posted on social media. Wounded, misunderstood, the son protecting his mother from poor choices. But the voice that once came so easily now wavered under the weight of documents and testimony. He stammered when asked to explain the credit account in my name. When pinned by specific dates and references, his answers grew evasive and thin. At one point, he tried the old manipulation, suggesting I was forgetful, that maybe I'd misplaced funds or misunderstood. The judge leaned forward and asked me directly, with a kindness I hadn't expected, "Do you understand these documents?" "I do," I answered. My voice was clear. "I understand them because I kept them. I kept everything because something felt wrong, and I knew in my bones that someone I loved had betrayed me." There was a momentary stillness, as if the judge had been handed a photograph of a truth he couldn't ignore. Marcus's lawyer requested a short recess. In the hall, I saw the look on Marcus's face, not the smugness of a son who had control, but the raw fear of a man whose private ledger had become public. When the judge returned, he denied the guardianship petition, at least for the time being. He ordered a full investigation into the alleged financial abuses and placed a temporary injunction preventing Marcus from accessing any of my accounts or opening new credit in my name. It wasn't the final victory I would later secure, but it was a powerful first blow. Outside the courthouse, sunlight felt different, sharper, clearer. People passed by with their own burdens, but I felt a lightness I hadn't known in years. I had walked into a place designed to strip away pretenses and walked out with the beginning of justice in my hands. As we got into the car, Daniel squeezed my shoulder. "This is only the start," he said. "But you were brave today." Bravery felt like an ordinary thing in that moment. It was the practical courage of a woman who'd worked nights and days, who'd saved and sacrificed, who refused to let a grown child steal even the dignity she earned. I drove home looking at my empty living room and felt something else taking root. Not revenge, exactly, but the calm restoration of self. The son who'd tried to seize my life would learn, slowly and surely, that I was not his to control. Don't miss the next part. When the public learns the truth, and Marcus's carefully curated life begins to crack under the weight of exposure. After the court hearing, my world grew quiet. Not peaceful quiet, but the heavy kind that sits in the corners of your house when you're waiting for the next storm. For a few days, Marcus didn't call, didn't text, didn't come by. I thought maybe he'd finally realized what he'd done and decided to stay away. But guilt was never something Marcus carried well. When his control slipped, he always found another way to regain it. And sure enough, the first sign came that Friday afternoon. I was at home when I heard a car pull up outside. I peeked through the curtain and saw a sleek black SUV, Marcus's car, parked in front of my house. He didn't come to the door this time. Instead, he sent Sabrina. She walked up with a sharp click of heels, holding a folder in her hands, her face expressionless. I opened the door halfway. "Marcus thought it would be better if I talked to you," she said. "He's worried you're making decisions that could hurt the family." I leaned against the doorframe. Hurt the family? Or hurt his image? Her jaw tightened, but she smiled politely. "You're angry, I understand. But Marcus has always taken care of you. You know that. He's built his career, his reputation, and now all of that could be ruined by a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" I repeated quietly. "You mean theft?" Sabrina's smile didn't waver. "If this goes public, Eleanor, it'll destroy him. The company could fire him. Do you really want to do that to your own son?" Her words hit like a dagger. Not because she was right, but because she knew where to aim. For years, I'd protected Marcus from everything. I'd built my life around his comfort. And even after all the lies, part of me still wanted to protect him. But then I remembered every bill, every forged signature, every time he'd called me crazy. I straightened my back. "I didn't destroy his career, Sabrina. He did that himself." Sabrina's face hardened. "You'll regret this," she said, and walked away. When she drove off, I locked the door, my hands trembling. But fear wasn't the same as weakness anymore. It was just proof that I still cared, and that I wasn't done fighting. Later that night, I received a call from an unknown number. I hesitated but answered. "Mom," it was Marcus. His voice was softer than usual, almost fragile. "Can we please talk?" I said nothing. "I know things went too far," he continued. "But I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted to make sure you were taken care of." "By stealing from me?" I asked quietly. He sighed. "It wasn't like that. You've always been impulsive. You give money away. You trust the wrong people. I was trying to protect what you worked for." I stayed silent. Marcus spoke again, desperation creeping into his tone. "If you keep this up, it'll ruin me, Mom. Please, just withdraw the complaint. I'll fix everything. I'll pay you back." The irony made me laugh. The kind of laugh that sounds more like heartbreak. "You can't pay back what you stole from me, Marcus. Because it wasn't just money. It was trust." He didn't respond. I could hear his breathing on the other end, uneven and strained. Finally, he said, "You think you've won, but you haven't. You'll see." The line went dead. That night I couldn't sleep. My thoughts kept circling around his last words. You'll see. The next morning I went outside to get the mail. And froze. Someone had spray-painted a word across my fence in bright red. Liar. For a long time I just stood there staring at it, the cold air biting my skin. Then I slowly walked inside, locked the door, and called Daniel. When he arrived, I showed him the fence. He sighed, took photos, and said, "We'll document everything. He's trying to intimidate you. But this just strengthens your case." I nodded, but a part of me still ached. I looked at that red word again and thought of the little boy Marcus used to be. The one who cried when he broke a toy. The one who hugged me when I was sick. That boy was gone. That evening, I decided to do something Marcus would never expect. I sat at my old wooden table, opened my laptop, and began writing my own statement. Not for the court, not for revenge, but for the truth. I wrote about every sacrifice, every betrayal, every small act of love that went unnoticed. I wanted it all in writing. A record of what really happened before others could twist it. When I finished, I saved the file under one name. For Marcus, when he's ready. Because deep down, I still believed that one day he might read it. And when he did, maybe he'd finally understand the kind of mother he'd lost. Don't miss the next part. When Marcus's secrets start to surface publicly, and the truth about his perfect life begins to crumble faster than he ever imagined. The next few days felt like standing in the eye of a storm. Quiet on the surface, but full of pressure underneath. I went to work as usual, made my tea, smiled at my neighbors, and pretended nothing was wrong. But inside, I knew Marcus was planning something. He always did when he felt cornered. By Tuesday, my instincts proved right. I received an email from my bank saying someone had tried to access my new account online. Thankfully, the security system blocked it. But the message made my blood run cold. Marcus was still trying to get in. I immediately called the bank. They confirmed there had been 2 failed login attempts, both traced to an IP address near Marcus's office. The representative offered to increase the account's security level and add a secondary verification process. I thanked her, hung up, and just sat there in silence for a long time. How could a son, my son, do this to his own mother? That night, I called Daniel and told him about the attempt. He told me not to panic, but his tone was serious. "Eleanor, this is escalation. We'll need to inform the court. It proves intent to interfere even after being legally restricted." I nodded, but part of me wasn't angry anymore. It was sad. Marcus had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Later that week, my life changed again. This time, unexpectedly. I was at the grocery store when someone tapped my shoulder. I turned to see Sharon, an old friend I hadn't seen in over a decade. We used to work together at the law office before I retired. Her face lit up when she saw me. "Eleanor, it's been years," she said, hugging me warmly. We caught up for a few minutes, and when I mentioned my son's name, her smile faltered slightly. "Marcus Harris? The financial advisor?" My stomach tightened. "Yes, why?" Sharon hesitated. "Eleanor, I think you should know something. He's been in the news at my firm. They're investigating some client inconsistencies." My heart pounded. "What do you mean?" She lowered her voice. "Apparently, there are missing funds in several accounts he managed. I don't know all the details, but it doesn't look good." It felt like the floor fell out beneath me. I thanked her and hurried home, my mind racing. If Marcus was stealing from his clients too, this wasn't just about me anymore. This was who he had become. When I got home, I searched his name online, and there it was. An article from a local finance magazine. Community advisor under internal review for financial misconduct. There was no photo, but I didn't need one. The name said it all. Marcus Harris, senior consultant, Westfield Investments. My hands trembled as I read the article. It said the company had received complaints from clients about unauthorized transactions and was conducting an internal audit. I sat back in my chair, stunned. It was as if all the masks he'd worn, The caring son, the successful advisor, the devoted husband were peeling away one by one. That night I didn't sleep. I walked through my house, touching the walls, the quiet furniture, the empty spaces where life used to feel warm. I thought of the little boy Marcus had once been, the one I used to sing to sleep, the one who said he'd buy me a house one day. And now, that same boy was on the verge of losing everything. A few days later, Daniel called me again. His voice was firm. "Eleanor, the audit went public. Marcus's company contacted me. They want to confirm whether your case is connected." "Connected?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "It appears Marcus used some of the same techniques with clients that he used with you. Unauthorized transfers, forged authorizations, and manipulation of financial trust." I closed my eyes. So it wasn't just me. He'd been practicing this pattern for years. "Will he go to jail?" I whispered. Daniel hesitated. "That depends on the outcome of the investigation. But Eleanor, it's not looking good for him." I hung up and stared at the wall, my emotions tangled between heartbreak and justice. I didn't want to destroy my son, but I couldn't stop the truth from surfacing anymore. It had a life of its own now. A week later, the news broke wider. Local media ran the story with his picture. Neighbors began whispering. Sabrina stopped coming to the neighborhood altogether. And Marcus, he disappeared. For 2 weeks, there was nothing. No calls, no visits, not even an email. Just silence. And then, one Sunday morning, I heard the knock. Soft this time. Not demanding, not angry. Just tired. When I opened the door, Marcus stood there. Unkempt, unshaven, his eyes sunken from sleepless nights. "Mom," he whispered, "I have nowhere else to go." Don't miss the next part. When I tell you what happened the moment I let him inside, and how the truth between us finally came face to face in ways neither of us were ready for. He stood there on my porch like a man who had aged 10 years in 2 weeks. His shoulders were hunched, his suit wrinkled, and his eyes, once full of pride, were now heavy with defeat. For a moment, I didn't recognize him as my son. He looked like a stranger who'd lost his way and didn't know where to go. "Mom," Marcus's voice cracked, "I just need a place to stay for a few days. Please." The mother in me wanted to slam the door shut, but another part, the part that remembered holding him when he was sick, the part that prayed for him every night, hesitated. I stepped aside. "You can come in," I said quietly. He nodded and entered, his steps uncertain. He looked around the house, noticing how bare it still was since I'd sold most of the furniture. His eyes lingered on the empty spaces, maybe realizing for the first time what his greed had done. He sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where he once laid out the forged documents. I poured him a cup of coffee without saying a word. He took it with shaking hands. For a long while there was silence between us. Finally he said, "They fired me, Mom." "I know," I said softly. "They froze my accounts. Sabrina left, and everyone I thought was my friend just disappeared overnight." He rubbed his face, defeated. "I lost everything." I took a deep breath. "No, Marcus, you lost everyone you used. That's not the same thing." He looked up at me, his eyes glassy. "You think I don't know that? I messed up, okay? I got greedy. I thought I could handle it all. I wanted to feel anger, but what I felt instead was exhaustion. You didn't just mess up, Marcus. You lied, stole, and broke the trust of the only person who would have stood by you no matter what." He swallowed hard. "I know." He reached into his bag and pulled out a folded envelope. "I've been working with the auditors. They said I could reduce some of the charges if I return what I took. I managed to pull together some money." He slid the envelope toward me. "I didn't touch it. That's not what I want," I said. He frowned. "Then what do you want, Mom? What do you want me to do?" I looked at him steadily. "I want you to tell the truth. All of it. Not just to me, but to everyone you hurt. Your clients, your company, the people who trusted you. Do that, And maybe someday I'll be able to forgive you." He lowered his gaze, staring at the cup of coffee like it held the answers he couldn't find. "You really think that'll make a difference?" "Yes," I said, "because owning your wrongs is the only way to rebuild your soul." He didn't answer, but for the first time in years, I saw tears fall from his eyes, silent, genuine tears, and for a brief moment I saw a glimpse of the boy he used to be. The one who once hugged me when I cried, the one who used to say, "Mom, I'll always take care of you." But reality returned quickly. He wasn't that boy anymore, and I couldn't go back in time. That night I let him stay in the guest room. I could hear him pacing for hours. Around midnight the floor creaked, and I heard quiet sobs through the wall. I turned over in bed, clutching my blanket, tears in my own eyes, because no matter how strong I tried to be, a mother's heart never stops loving her child, even when it's broken. The next morning, Marcus came into the kitchen dressed in the same clothes. His face looked calmer but distant. "I'm going to turn myself in today," he said simply. I looked at him in disbelief. "You're serious?" He nodded. "Yeah, I talked to Daniel last night. He said if I cooperate, they'll reduce the sentence. It's time I face what I did." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then I reached out and touched his hand. "It's not too late to start being the man I raised you to be." He squeezed my hand lightly, then stood and walked toward the door. But before leaving, he turned and said, "Mom, thank you for still opening the door." When the door closed behind him, I felt something shift inside me. Not joy, not sorrow, but peace. The kind that comes from knowing the truth had finally caught up to the lies. I walked to the window and watched as he drove away, his car disappearing down the street. For the first time in years, the house felt quiet in a good way. He was going to face the consequences, and I was finally free. Don't miss the next part, when I reveal what happened after Marcus turned himself in, and how one unexpected letter from him changed everything I thought I knew about forgiveness. The day Marcus turned himself in was strangely calm. I thought I'd cry, scream, or crumble. But instead I just sat in my living room, quiet, breathing deeply, surrounded by a silence that didn't hurt anymore. It felt like the storm had passed, and all that was left was the sound of the world settling again. The news reported his arrest 2 days later. His photo appeared online, and the words, "Financial fraud investigation, arrest made," crawled across the bottom of the local channel. I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling two things at once: heartbreak and closure. People in the neighborhood started whispering again, but this time, I didn't care. I had spent so many years living under guilt and manipulation that now, even whispers couldn't touch me. My story was out there, and so was the truth. That night, Daniel called. "Eleanor, it's official," he said. "Marcus confessed to everything. Your case and several client accounts. He's cooperating with the authorities. It looks like he might serve time, but his cooperation will count in his favor," listened silently. Then said, "Thank you, Daniel, for everything." He paused. "Are you all right?" "Yes," I said softly. "For the first time in a long time, I really am." A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Marcus, sent from the detention center. I held the envelope for hours before opening it, afraid of what his words might do to me. When I finally read it, the first line made my eyes blur with tears. "Mom, I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I need you to know that you were right." He wrote about the emptiness of chasing money, the way greed eats away at love, and how every night, sitting in that small gray room, he finally understood what I had been trying to teach him all along. He said the hardest part wasn't losing his job, his wife, or his friends. It was losing my trust. He ended the letter with, "You told me once that truth can rebuild a soul. I hope you were right, because I'm trying to find mine again." I sat there reading it over and over, my tears falling onto the page. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was real. And for the first time, I let myself forgive. Not to free him, but to free myself. The following Sunday, I went to the small community church I hadn't visited in years. I lit a candle and whispered, "Thank you." Not because everything was fixed, but because I had finally made peace with my own heart. After service, a woman approached me. She'd seen the local story and asked, "Are you really Marcus Harris's mother?" I nodded carefully, unsure of what she'd say next. But she smiled. "I just wanted to say you're brave. Most people would have stayed silent, but you stood up for yourself." Her words broke something open inside me. For years I'd thought speaking up made me a bad mother, but now I realized silence had been the real prison. That night I sat down with a notebook and began writing again. Not for Marcus this time, but for myself. I wanted to tell my story, every painful and beautiful part of it, so that maybe someone else out there would recognize themselves before it was too late. Weeks passed, and I started volunteering at a women's shelter in town. Many of them had gone through what I had: financial abuse, manipulation, betrayal by someone they trusted. For the first time, I realized my pain had a purpose. Helping them heal was helping me heal, too. And one quiet morning, as sunlight poured through my window, I whispered something to myself I hadn't said in years. "I'm proud of you, Eleanor." Not because I won, but because I survived with grace. Don't miss the next part, when I reveal the shocking truth about what Marcus did while in prison and the unexpected redemption that changed both our lives forever. 3 months passed after Marcus's sentencing. Life slowly started to feel normal again. Or at least, peaceful. I'd stopped jumping at every phone call and learned how to sleep through the night without nightmares. My little garden had started blooming again, and so had I. One morning, as I was watering the roses, I noticed a small white envelope tucked under my front door. It didn't have a stamp, just my name, written in familiar handwriting. Marcus's. I froze. How could he have written me without postage? Then I saw the note inside. "Delivered by Pastor Reynolds. Thank you for letting me write to her." The letter was long, written in his slanted handwriting that hadn't changed since childhood. "Mom, I know you don't owe me anything. Not forgiveness. Not even a reply. But I want you to know that prison isn't what's changing me. You are." He went on to describe how, after months of isolation, he started helping older inmates write letters to their families. Most of them had no one. Some had done terrible things. But they talked to him about regret, about the moments that broke them, about how pride had cost them their peace. One man told me, "If you still have someone who loves you, you're richer than the rest of us." It made me think of you, Mom. I didn't realize that my greed wasn't about money. It was about control. I wanted to prove I could take care of everything, but all I did was take away what mattered most. As I read, my eyes filled with tears. He wasn't the arrogant man from months ago. He sounded humble, human. "I've joined the rehabilitation program here. I'm helping other inmates with financial literacy classes. I'm teaching them how to manage honestly, something I should have done years ago. I don't know if this will make up for what I've done, but I want to try." I sat on the couch holding the letter to my chest, feeling something I hadn't in a long time: hope. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the pastor who had delivered Marcus's letter. "Mrs. Harris," he said gently, "Marcus wanted me to thank you. He said your forgiveness is the reason he's alive right now." I didn't understand at first. "Alive?" The pastor sighed. He had a very rough start when he came in. Many inmates go through deep depression, but he said your letter, the one where you told him truth rebuilds a soul, kept him from giving up. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I felt my heart swell and ache all at once. My son, the same one who'd stolen everything from me, was now giving hope to others. That Sunday, I visited the church again. After the service, I stayed behind, sitting in silence as the sunlight streamed through the stained glass. I prayed for Marcus, not for freedom, but for peace. Months rolled by. Marcus kept writing, letters full of reflection, guilt, and eventually, gratitude. He never asked me for money or favors. He just wanted me to know what he was learning. In one of his last letters, he wrote something that stayed with me. Mom, I finally understand what strength looks like. It's not control. It's forgiveness. You were strong long before I ever was. Those words healed parts of me I didn't even know were still broken. By the time his sentence was half over, I had started a small community workshop for older adults, teaching them how to protect themselves from financial abuse. I named it Project Faith and Finance. Daniel helped me set it up legally. It felt like life had come full circle. My pain had turned into purpose. Then one morning, I got a call from the prison warden. Mrs. Harris, he said, I just wanted to let you know your son has been recommended for early release due to his good behavior and contributions to the education program. I covered my mouth, tears streaming down. He's being released? Yes, ma'am. In about 6 weeks. I hung up and sat there, stunned. The boy I raised, the man I almost lost, was finally coming home. That evening, I went to my garden, looked at the sky and whispered, maybe this time we both start new, because for the first time in years, I wasn't just a mother waiting for justice. I was a woman finally ready to forgive completely and rebuild what love had once broken. Don't miss the next part. When Marcus finally comes home, and the emotional reunion between a mother and son becomes something far more powerful than either expected. The morning of Marcus's release was warm and golden, the kind of morning that felt like it belonged to new beginnings. I woke up before dawn, made coffee, and sat by the window watching the light creep across the yard. For months I had imagined this day. What I'd say, how I'd feel. But when it finally came, I wasn't angry, or afraid, or even nervous. I just felt ready. Daniel called me early. The release is confirmed, he said. He'll be out by noon. They'll process his paperwork, and then he's free to leave. I thanked him, my voice shaking slightly. Does he have a place to go? He paused. He listed your address, Eleanor, but only if you're comfortable with that. I looked out the window at my quiet little house, the home that had once been a place of pain, then strength, and now maybe healing. Yes, I whispered. He can come home. By noon, a familiar car pulled into the driveway. Marcus stepped out slowly, wearing simple clothes the prison had provided, a small bag slung over his shoulder. For a moment, I saw the shadow of the man he used to be, confident, proud. But it was gone just as quickly. What stood before me now was humility. He stopped at the gate, hesitant. Hi, Mom. I smiled softly. Hi, son. Neither of us moved for a second. Then I opened the gate and he walked toward me. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. He reached me, and I wrapped my arms around him. After all the years, the silence, the pain, my son was finally home. For a long time, we just stood there, crying quietly. Inside, he looked around at the house. It hasn't changed much, he said, his voice soft. Neither has the coffee, I replied, smiling faintly. I poured him a cup, just like I used to. He held it for a moment, staring into the steam. Mom, I don't deserve to be here. I sat across from him. You're not here because you deserve it, Marcus. You're here because forgiveness doesn't need permission. He looked at me with wet eyes. I don't know if I can ever make this right. You don't have to, I said. Just live differently. That's enough. We spent the afternoon talking. He told me about the inmates he'd helped, about the men who couldn't read, the ones who cried when they wrote to their children for the first time. He said teaching them felt like redemption in small pieces. Maybe that's my second chance, he said. Helping others do what I couldn't do right the first time. I nodded. Maybe it is. Question for you. Do you believe people who do wrong can truly rebuild their lives if they choose honesty and humility? That evening we had dinner together for the first time in years. Not the way it used to be, him talking about business and money, but simple and quiet. Just a mother and son, eating soup and remembering how to speak to each other again. After dinner, Marcus stood up, took a deep breath and said, "Mom, there's one more thing I want to tell you." I looked up. "What is it?" He pulled out a folded envelope from his pocket. "It's from the restitution program. Every paycheck I earned from the prison workshop is being sent to your account now. It's not much, but it's something." I shook my head, tears forming. "Marcus, you don't owe me money." He smiled sadly. "It's not about owing. It's about restoring." Those words, about restoring, stayed with me long after he went to bed that night. As I cleaned the dishes, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window and saw something I hadn't seen in years. A woman at peace, not because everything was perfect, but because forgiveness had turned pain into power. Later, I walked into the guest room to check on Marcus. He was already asleep, breathing deeply, a soft calmness on his face. For the first time since he was a child, I tucked the blanket around him and whispered, "Welcome home." Standing in that doorway, I realized something profound. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It transforms it. It takes broken things and teaches them how to live again. And that's exactly what we were doing. Living again. Don't miss the next part. When Marcus finds a new purpose in his freedom, and the surprise he gives me leaves me speechless and in tears. The days after Marcus's return felt different. Softer somehow. The air in the house no longer carried tension, only quiet understanding. We didn't try to pretend the past hadn't happened. Instead, we moved carefully around it, like walking across old floorboards that creaked but no longer broke. Every morning, Marcus joined me for breakfast. He had stopped wearing suits. Now he wore simple shirts and jeans. The man who once obsessed over status and appearance now found joy in small things. Black coffee, morning walks, and helping me tend the garden. One morning, while planting new roses, he said, "Mom, do you remember when I was a kid and you used to tell me the red ones meant love and the white ones meant forgiveness?" I smiled. "Of course I do. You said you'd plant a whole field of white roses for me one day." He chuckled softly. "I think I owe you a few acres then." For the first time in years, we both laughed. Not forced, not strained, just real laughter. Later that week, Marcus told me he wanted to start working again, not in finance. He said that life was over for him, but somewhere honest, something meaningful. Maybe a community center or a re-entry program, he said. Something that helps people rebuild, like I'm trying to. I looked at him proudly. "That's a good choice. It suits you now," he smiled. "You think anyone will hire me?" "You've already hired yourself, Marcus," I said gently. "Redemption is work you do every day." A few days later, he applied for a part-time job at a local nonprofit that helped low-income families manage debt and learn budgeting. When he got the call saying he'd been accepted, he just sat there, speechless. "Looks like someone believes in second chances," I said. He looked up at me, his eyes shining. "You did first, Mom." Would you give a second chance to someone who truly changed? Or would you always see them for who they used to be? The following weeks passed peacefully. Marcus left early for work and came home tired but smiling. He told me stories about people he helped. A single mother who learned to save money for the first time. A young man who avoided payday loans because of his advice. He said, "It feels like I'm paying back the world, one person at a time." But one Friday evening, He came home holding something in his hand. A small envelope folded neatly. "This is for you," he said, placing it on the table. I opened it and gasped. Inside was a check. Not huge, but large enough to matter. "Marcus, what is this?" He smiled. "My first full paycheck. I wanted to do something good with it. The shelter you volunteer at. They need a new freezer for food storage, right? I thought maybe we could donate together." My throat tightened. "Together?" "Yes," he said softly. "We started this healing together, didn't we? It only feels right to give back that way." Tears blurred my vision. I nodded and hugged him, whispering, "I'm proud of you, son." That weekend, we went to the shelter together. When the director learned who Marcus was, she hesitated. "But Marcus spoke before I could. I hurt people before," he said quietly. "But now I want to help others recover from the same kind of hurt." The director smiled gently. "Everyone deserves a new chapter." As we walked out, Marcus turned to me and said, "You know, Mom, maybe the best part of losing everything is learning what actually matters." I looked at him, the sun shining across his face, and realized the boy I'd lost years ago had finally found his way home. Not just to me, but to himself. That evening, as we sat on the porch, he said something that would stay with me forever. "Mom, I used to think love was about control, about doing everything for someone. But now I know it's about freedom. You let me fall so I could learn how to stand again." My eyes filled with tears, and you stood up beautifully. That night, I wrote in my journal, "Sometimes healing doesn't come from fixing the past, but from growing something new in its place." And as I looked at the white roses blooming outside the window, I realized Marcus had kept his promise after all. He had planted forgiveness in both our hearts. Don't miss the next part. When Marcus surprises me with something I never expected, a gesture that closes our story with the most powerful act of love a son could give. It had been 6 months since Marcus came home, and life had finally found a rhythm again. The days were simple but full. Mornings with coffee and laughter, afternoons in the garden, and evenings where the silence between us felt warm, not empty. Marcus's work at the nonprofit was going well. He'd earned respect from his co-workers and trust from the people he helped. Word spread in the community about the man who turned his mistakes into lessons. And for once, he didn't shy away from his past. He shared it honestly, hoping others would learn from it. One morning, he came into the kitchen looking unusually excited. "Mom," he said, "don't make plans this weekend. I have a surprise for you." I laughed softly. "After all the surprises I've had, should I be nervous?" He smiled. "This one's a good kind, I promise." When Saturday arrived, he insisted I wear something nice but comfortable. He wouldn't tell me where we were going, only that it was something important. The drive took nearly an hour. We went past the city, then down a quiet road lined with oak trees, until we stopped in front of a small, newly built community center. The sign above the door read, "The Harris Hope Center, a place for second chances." My breath caught. I turned to him, speechless. He smiled, tears glistening in his eyes. "It's a small branch of the nonprofit. We're opening it next month. It'll offer free financial literacy classes, support groups for families affected by fraud, and a workshop for people re-entering society after prison." I covered my mouth. "Marcus, you did this?" He nodded. "Not alone. I told my boss about everything you went through, about what you taught me. They agreed to partner with me to start it here, in your name. The idea came from you." He pointed to a plaque by the door. It read, "Dedicated to Eleanor Harris, for teaching that forgiveness is the truest form of freedom." Tears streamed down my face. I couldn't speak. All I could do was pull him into my arms and whisper, "I'm so proud of you, son." Before continuing, please subscribe and tell me where you're watching this story from, because what I'm about to tell you is still unbelievable. He held me tightly. "Mom, this is my way of saying thank you. You didn't just forgive me. You saved me. You showed me that love isn't about perfection. It's about redemption." For a long moment, I just stood there, holding him, my heart so full it hurt. Later, he gave me a tour of the building. A few small classrooms, a conference room, and a cozy library with second-hand books. On one wall hung framed photos of people smiling at community events. People Marcus had helped. He said, "Every class will start with a quote you once told me. Truth rebuilds a soul." It changed me. Maybe it'll change someone else too. When we got home that evening, Marcus made dinner. Something simple but heartfelt. As we ate, he raised his glass and said, "To new beginnings, Mom." I raised mine too. To grace, because it's what turns brokenness into beauty. Later that night, as I sat by the window watching the moonlight pour into the garden, I looked at the rows of white roses Marcus had planted after coming home. They'd grown tall, strong, and full of life, just like the bond between us. I whispered to myself, forgiveness didn't just save him, it saved me too. Before going to bed, I added one final line to my journal, the story I had been writing for nearly a year. Sometimes the greatest redemption stories aren't about finding justice. They're about finding peace. And as I closed the journal, I smiled. Because this time, the story didn't end in pain. It ended in peace, love, and forgiveness. Sometimes life takes turns we never expect. Every person in this story carried their own pain, their own choices, and their own consequences. Maybe you saw yourself in one of them. Or maybe it reminded you of someone you once knew. What do you think happened next? What would you have done if you were in their place? If you have any questions about what happened to the other characters, or if you want me to share more about them, just comment below. I read every message you leave, and your thoughts truly mean a lot to me. And if this story touched your heart, inspired you, or even made you think differently, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps me keep sharing stories that move people, open minds, and remind us we're all human at the end of the day. Your support keeps these stories alive. Thank you for watching, for feeling, and for being part of this journey. More powerful stories are coming soon. Stay tuned and stay kind.